Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome back to Algebra. It's our last day in new stuff. It is the last video of the year, so we made it. Just want to say thanks for a fun one. Other than that, let's get to a couple of announcements. Got a lot of stuff to talk about this morning. So if you're tuning in, make sure you take good notes. A lot of important information on this introduction here this morning. So first, as a reminder, all your missing homeworks must be turned in by the end of this week. So you got 2 days to get it done if you are missing any homework. Otherwise, they will go in as zeros in the grade book. We have our last quiz of the semester tomorrow in class, so make sure you take a look at that as well. And then we had a bunch of stuff on the final exam that we're going to talk about more in just a second. So again, that is 1 week from today, Tuesday, June 1st. So please make sure you are looking ahead to that. We will have an exam packet posted or exam review packet posted for you, Honest Learning, to take a look at so you can get ready for that final. So let's get into some final exam information. First and foremost, you do have to come to your final exam, even if you are virtual. It's going to be the normal Google Meet chat at this respective time. So day 1, period 2, 3, 4, 5, or behind Mrs. Millard, or behind my head here, you can see if I move my head out of the way, it's period 6. So again, if you are at home, the period times or period slots might not mean a whole lot to you, but period 2, this is 9 a.m., this is 10 o'clock. For period 3, 11 o'clock in the morning. We have 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And then period 6 is, I'll do that over here, 1 p.m. is when you have to go to your Google Meet on that day. So the reason for that, district is requiring attendance for all students at that time for your final exam. So make sure you know where you fit. So your grading teacher, June 1st, a week from today, period 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 respectively, at 9, 10, 11, 12, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then if you are unable to make it, you need to reach out to your grading teacher as soon as possible so we can get you switched around to a spot that you can actually attend. So the reason for this, again, is attendance is required for finals by the district. It always has been, probably always will be. Attendance will be taken, so you must show up for the final. The final one is the final due. Again, we're going to give out a password that you need in order to take it, so that's why you need to come to class. So you will not get the password unless you come to the Google Meet for the final exam. You have until the end of the day on June 3rd, so midnight on June 3rd, to get that done. So you basically got 2 days to take your test if you don't finish it in the final exam slot on Tuesday next week. So otherwise, if it's not done by then, it is a 0 in the gradebook. No late submissions are accepted, just because that is the hard deadline from Wassa West. That is what we are. The last time we can accept new assignments. Anyways, just like any other tests, you can use all your resources, homework, notes, your review videos that we've been making for you guys this year, toolkits, all that stuff is fair game. And then last but not least, I've had some questions on this too the last couple of days. The final is 25 points and it's 10% of your overall semester grade. So it definitely behooves you to study hard, ask questions the next couple of days in class, and do the best that you can on that final exam. So if you have any more questions on that, please reach out to your grading teacher. We'll be happy to help you. Otherwise, let's jump into 914. Today we are again choosing a strategy for how to solve quadratics. If you want to check your answers from last night's homework, you can check the video or check the filled in notes on the side. So before we get into that, what I want to do is finish filling out our toolkit, and what we're going to finish that with is just adding the quadratic formula. So again, that is that is the formula that we use to find the x-intercepts of any quadratic function when it is not factorable. So we have x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. So again, what those variables and letters mean is that they are the coefficients of a quadratic equation in standard form. So for example, we've got one of those right below in our toolkit, so x squared minus 3x minus 10. There's a 1 out in front of this x squared. So in this case, because again, standard form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So again, we just want the coefficients out in front. We don't want the variables attached. But in this case, for our example down here, a is equal to 1. B would be equal to -3 because whatever sign's out in front of that number has to go with it. And then C would be equal to -10. Then we could plug everything in to that equation like we've been doing in class the last couple of days, solve to find our 2 answers at the very end. And then the big thing to keep in mind and remember is that this plus or minus right there means that we're going to end up with 2 equations at the very end. So we got to split it apart where we are adding 1 or subtracting 1. So that's how we get our 2 x-intercepts, because most of the time, at least in this class, we're going to have 2 x-intercepts. So, and then one other very important thing, just because we're finding the x-intercepts, our quadratic equations always have to be set equal to 0 in order for this to work. Otherwise, it's not going to. So we always have to have whatever our quadratic equation is equal to 0. Otherwise, we're not going to get the right thing, like we saw yesterday. All right, so let's get into some new stuff. 914. Again, we're going to skip the warm-up because we basically just did that. Today's all about choosing a strategy. So we know the zero product property. We know about the quadratic formula. So which way is going to be the best way to find our x-intercepts? So again, remember, zero product property is like factoring it first and then setting those 2 sets of parentheses equal to 0 to get our 2 solutions. Quadratic formula is what we just talked about. So a good place to start is if we look at 34, a good rule of thumb is if we have whole numbers, we could probably try to factor that thing first before we just plug it into the quadratic formula. So if you have whole numbers, you probably could be able to do that. When we see something like B, where we've got decimals, and again, not even equal to 0, you'd have to move this 6 over first. The quadratic formula is probably going to be our best bet. So if we keep looking down, part C is already in factored form, so zero product property is definitely going to be the way we want to solve this one. D, you can probably factor this one or use the quadratic formula as long as we rearrange it to make sure it looks like standard form and is equal to 0. As we look to the next page, E and F, again, E you could probably factor as long as we get this thing moved around. If it doesn't factor, then you probably would have to use quadratic formula for that one again, because if it doesn't factor, the x-intercepts will be found with the quadratic formula all the time. And then F, rearrange it, and those are some pretty big numbers. I would probably use the quadratic formula for that one. So what I want you to do, take a look at A, B, C, D, E, and F. Pick a method, solve for the x-intercepts. I'll post the solutions on the filled-in notes for you and the method that I would recommend using. So have at it. Take a crack at those. I'm going to move on to 36 because that is talking about, again, the important part for today, which is what we need to do if things don't equal 0. So 36, we have x minus 5 times x plus 2 is equal to -6. So Kyle thought that x must equal 5 or -2. But Stanton said not so fast because the product does not equal 0. So we need to change the equation first. So if we take a look at this quadratic, right here, we have a big issue. So again, when we multiply these two things together, they do not equal 0. They equal -6. So the only time we can find the x-intercepts is when this value is equal to 0. So we have to rearrange this before we can try to solve it. So basically what we got to do is we got to double distribute these two things and then move this 6 over, and then we can refactor it and find our x-intercepts. So let's do that. So I'm going to rewrite this down here. If we have x minus 5 times x plus 2 is equal to -6, let's distribute this thing. So we get x squared, we get plus 2x minus 5x. And then we have a -10 at the end. That is all still equal to -6. So now if we move the 6 over and combine our like terms, we are left with, let's do this down here, x squared minus 3x minus 4 is equal to 0. And now I think we can factor this because once we are equal to 0, now we can use either zero product property or the quadratic formula. I think let's try to factor this thing. Again, what I mentioned, when we have the 1 out in front, like we do with x squared, we can kind of skip right to the parentheses at the very end because the only two things that multiply together to get us x squared are x and x. So if we put x here, we put x here. Now we just need to figure out multiples of -4 that would add to -3. Let's try 1 and 4. So if we make this -4, this plus 1, If we double check this real quick, x times x is x squared. X times 1 is just positive x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x, so that makes negative 3x, and then negative 4 times positive 1 is going to be negative 4. So we are in good shape. So this is our factored form. So we know that if we set both of these things equal to 0, we need two equations, x minus 4 equals 0. One of our x's will be equal to 4, and the other one, x plus 1, is equal to 0. Our other x will be negative 1. So if you want to check this, again, we can just plug those numbers back into the equation, or if you can get a graphing calculator, go to Desmos, plug them in, check it out, see how you did, or we can see how we did there. Other than that, we have one more. We have number 37 for today, which is kind of a challenge problem, just applying our knowledge of parabolas to figure out the vertical height and things of the yo-yo with Mr. Mo. So I think I'll have you try this one at home as well. It's kind of a challenge problem, so I think try and give it a crack. I'll put the answers up for you either way. So the most important thing though that I want to finish with, because it's a little shorter video today, is if you're still missing stuff, get it done. Again, we're down to the end of the semester here. The final is important, so please make sure you're studying away at that. If you have any questions, please reach out to us as we finish up the year. Finish strong. If you got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody, and we'll see you all for the final next week.